Absolutely. Also, Craig, Baylor lost a recruit today in football.
Yeah, they just a little while ago found out that Desoto linebacker Brandon Booker has decommitted, as you can see right there on your screens, and they had just picked up Graydon Grimes last week. So now they gain one, they lose one, and they are back down to what I think that would give them like 5 commits on the 2020 or in the 2024 class. Has offers from Arkansas and Auburn and Colorado and FSU. So, put all that together and the other offers that he has as well. And it's not hard to figure out, like, he wants to explore options or whatever the case may be, or fancy somewhere else, or NIL money, or relationship, whatever you want to point to. It doesn't really matter. It all results in the same thing, where Baylor loses a big-time recruit out of their class. So, a top 100-ish type of guy in the state, and obviously a pretty good offer list. So that's a tough one, and that sinks their class down to where it's now like, I don't pay attention with every single subtraction and addition on where the ranking is. Like, that'd be pointless to worry about that constantly. But as far as, the end of the year, where they wind up, they're going to go up just simply based on numbers. But the problem is, so is everybody else around them. So, where are they going to shoot up to get into top 40-ish, 30-ish, where they probably should be on a regular basis? I mean, I think that's probably one of your concerns right now is how do they get some momentum in recruiting, because that hasn't really carried over all that well. You had big success 2 years ago, probably parlayed some of that into some good gets. They've obviously hit the transfer portal very hard, so maybe that's just a route that takes up some of the slack from not recruiting at a super high level high school-wise. But I do have my wonders right now on just sort of the momentum or lack thereof, and buzz or lack thereof, and just sort of where they are in the landscape. They really need to win some games next year, and can't ill afford to have another 6-7 type of season like we saw last year, especially with how that was just a slog at times to get through for everybody involved. So not good, not, a major shocker, because they typically lose a handful of guys to decommits along the way. But, when it's a small class, it's even more noticeable. When you have a guy from DeSoto, that's notable. And you've had some guys from there of late, but, you're not going to have this one most likely unless he somehow circles back. So tough loss. And he's got some big contenders that, are going to give him plenty of options. But, yeah, not fun for Baylor fans, which, is it's kind of feels like something needs to break their way somehow, but I don't really think that can happen until you get into football season. Because what would that be? I mean, if it's a big recruit, it's like, okay, great, but then you got PTSD, shell shock, whatever from like this, for example, from the quarterback situation last year. You kind of know now, like, hey, commits are fun, but they're also, here one day, gone the next. So they need to get some stability in that regard, but it's recruiting, so that's part of the deal.
Yeah, I wonder, because I don't think, and I think this is an issue that they have, is that Dave Aranda's found his sea legs in this just yet on how to build the roster the way that you have to build a roster now. I don't think he needs to go like full, Lane Kiffin and being a portal king, but I do think that they have not used it enough, and maybe they've tried and failed a little bit. But I think, especially coming off of the Sugar Bowl win, they squandered their juice that they had for that year, because usually when you have a big season, it's not because of when that ends and when you've already signed people, especially now. So the year Baylor won the Sugar Bowl, most of their recruits were signed in December. So it's not like you can carry that into February to have this big class where people are excited about joining you. It is the next year following the Sugar Bowl or those big bowl wins where you get that wave of a class. It's like, holy cow. That's going to be the case for TCU, really. Their best recruiting class will not be 2023, because by the time the season was over, it was already signed. Their best one will probably be 2024, because now you've got the juice off of like, hey, we just won. You're going to camps, all these different things. Nothing's happened, yet in the other season, so that's where it is. Baylor wasted that year that they had. Not intentionally, but that just wound up happening, of getting that excitement and juice build up and everybody coming in to see, what's going on at Baylor. They, by going 6-7 last year, that kind of popped their balloon.
Somewhat. I mean, I think it would have been fine if you didn't lose your quarterback on National Signing Day.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that really, put a dent in things and kind of the feeling around everything. I think if Austin Novosad had signed as expected, then you celebrate that day and you're probably fine for where you end. But, yeah, I mean, since then, that followed up with the 6 and 7. So, I mean, what are you pointing to? The Big 12 title 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of dated at this point. K-State's already won one since then. TCU's already been in the playoffs since then. So you had some heat. You used it to some extent, but probably not as well as you could have. I mean, we'll see how last year's class ends up shaping up. Maybe they got more bang for their buck than they realized. But as far as just like right now in 2024 recruiting and just kind of moving forward, you know, they're not going to be the program that's out there super flashy and, you know, in your face on social media and all those things. But, I mean, they can't also just be sitting on their hands either. And I feel like they're kind of in a weird spot in the middle. It's just, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. There's not a lot of juice flowing right now, and I guess the only way to really solve that is to go win some football games. So that can't come soon enough in my mind. You go beat Utah in week 2, and we won't be talking about any of that. We'll be talking about how great everything is again. That's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and yeah, they, you know, I think that they, you know, I think we all thought there might be a little bit of a dip off the Sugar Bowl season, but last year was kind of a surprise to most people about how they followed up that win, especially. You know, it wasn't even about Blake Shapen in the skill position. Like, I thought even if that was exactly how it was, if the defense still had that attitude that it had and the ability to, you know, bully people around, then, yeah, they could have taken some of Blake Shapen's growing pains. But because the defense took a step back in Congress with the offense, then they had problems. You know, if the defense was still the same bunch of dudes who were just going to put a hurting on you and physically maul you, and I'll point to that BYU game. BYU was a really good team in 2021. They were a really good team. They had some of the best players they've had in a long time collectively on the roster all at the same time, and they came into Waco, and Baylor physically beat them down. And what was a pretty well-contested game, but the difference in that game was that Baylor physically beat them down on both sides of the ball, and that didn't happen for the most part in 2022, and that's the thing that shocked me the most. If the defense had been able to keep up that attitude that Dave Aranda wanted and had in 2021, then, yeah, they're probably in contention for the Big 12 title because in spite of, you know, Blake Shapen and the skill players and all this, because, yeah, you can win games on defense, but they couldn't pick what they were going to do whichever week to week, and that's why, you know, they kind of plummeted into their mediocrity last year.
Yeah, I mean, they were not very good on either side of the ball a year ago, and that happens when you lose a record number of draft picks, and you don't just replace Jalen Petrie and, you know, 6 other guys who are all long-time starting defensive players with, you know, dozens of games under their belt. I mean, there was some fall off to be expected, but I just don't think that they expected the offense to be as just vanilla and middle of the road as it kind of ended up being. You know, a large part due to just inexperience, but also just not terrific quarterback play. So I think just been kind of mediocre in that regard here the last 2-3 years. And they've had other areas of strength. I don't know what their strength is, though, coming up this year. What is it? It's not some great defense again on paper. It's not. They have even less return than they did last year, I believe.
The running back room, maybe.
The running back room could be your strength, but, I mean, if you can't throw the ball with worth of, you know what, then, I mean, that only lasts for so long before people catch on to that. So, yeah, I mean, I've been saying they have a lack of star power, which is fine. You don't necessarily have to have stars and faces, but there's a lot of questions around them, and, you know, following 6 and 7, there's no hot seat right now. Like, I think it's ridiculous. If anybody's even bringing that up with Dave Aranda, I think that's silly. Now, if we get into next season, like, we're like halfway through and you're talking about them being like 2 and 4, then maybe you start the conversation. But I think it's too early for that, though. I do think that you follow up 6 and 7 with like 7 and 6. That's not going to fly for a lot of people, and you're going to be really struggling to garner the type of support and kind of backing that you're really hoping for. And that would be a real shame 2 years less removed from, you know, being at the zenith of the program in so many ways. So, yeah, it's a big year coming up for them, without a doubt.
Yeah, 2021 and was of their 3 conference titles or Big 12 titles was their most complete season ever. You know, and best is probably in the eye of the beholder, you know. I mean, I think it's the best, but
I mean, it's the most games they've ever won.
Yeah,
they won the Sugar Bowl. They won the Big 12. Like, I don't – what season was better than that?
Yeah, no,
There wasn't one. There was no season better than that. So, yeah, you can argue it if you want to, but on paper, the facts are the facts. That's the most games they've ever won. And then you add in the Sugar Bowl and the Big 12 title and the way they won that Big 12 title, and then to go beat up Ole Miss the way that they did. That was a fun ride, and that seems very long ago, longer than 2 years ago, that's for sure. So see if they can rekindle some of that magic. But, again, just a very interesting year upcoming for them because there's a lot of unknowns, and maybe that's addressed by the transfer portal. It's hard to gauge that right now of how exactly 10 new guys are going to step in and impact you right away. So maybe that's the answer, but obviously we can't know that until we see them actually roll out there, which is still a bit of a ways away. So we wait and wonder and ponder what all that's going to look like here for a little while longer.